What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the latest film coming from Martin Scorsese, and that film is called Killers of the Flower Moon. Directed by Martin Scorsese, who wrote this film alongside Eric Roth, based on the book written by David Gran. This film stars people like Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, Jesse Plemons, and so many more. So I literally just got back home from the theater about literally 7 or 8 minutes ago, wrote down some quick notes for this, and so you're going to be getting my straight out of the theater thoughts on the latest film from Martin Scorsese that is based on true events that essentially tells the story of the white man taking over, Native American land, essentially. This is, of course, one individual story in just decades and decades and decades and decades of just horrifying things that happened, of course, to the Native Americans here in the history of the United States of America. So this was something I was interested going into for sure because, of course, it's done by one of the most acclaimed directors of all time, Martin Scorsese. It also has a fantastic cast of people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, and even some people in smaller roles like John Lithgow and Jesse Plemons, as well as even Brendan Fraser, who's in this film. And so seeing the trailers, I was incredibly excited. Now, as I was headed in to go check out the film, I saw the runtime for it and saw that it was about 3.5 hours long, just a little bit short. I believe it's 3 hours and 26 minutes long. And, I kind of expected that. I figured here we are now again with another historical drama that's telling a true, real life heartbreaking story that's being given to us by one of the most famous directors of all time. Of course, earlier in the year, we had something similar with the film Oppenheimer. Of course, very different subject matter, but coming to us from Nolan, which was about 3 hours long in and of itself. And, was, an enjoyable film that I enjoyed this year, but was one that I am not clamoring to revisit. And so going into this, I was wondering if this was going to be a similar thing where you have this long historical drama that I'm going to be able to appreciate things about, but I'm not necessarily sure if I'm going to be clamoring to revisit. So with all that said, I'll start this off by saying that I found this to be an incredibly well-made film. And I don't think that's going to surprise a lot of people who are fans of Martin Scorsese, as he typically puts together incredibly well-made films that usually have great performances, great editing, great sound design, great musical composition, great cinematography, all of the things that you expect from filmmaking. You can always expect that Martin Scorsese is going to be on top of all of those things. So right out of the gate, this is an incredibly well-crafted film that looks great, it's performed well, and just when it comes to all of the facets of filmmaking, I thought were really, really strong. However, if I'm completely and utterly honest, while I did find all of those things to be true, and while it was a film that I can at least say I did enjoy, I found this film to be incredibly boring at times, and it oftentimes kind of took me out of the film. And while I could appreciate how well made it was, and while I can appreciate that the film tackles some incredibly necessary subject matter that is important to see in films like this, I do feel like, unfortunately, because of the film's runtime and because of its pacing, this is going to be a film that is not going to be openly accepted by everybody who's a casual moviegoer. In our theater that we went to go see it in, there were some people who got up halfway through the film and left, and when my buddy Robbie from the Big Rob Theory got up for a moment to go to the restroom, he mentioned that he saw somebody was sleeping in the back, or a couple of people were sleeping in the back of the theater. And I do kind of expect that's going to be the case for a lot of people who go to see this movie. Now, that's not necessarily to dog on the film. I don't think that necessarily takes away from the absolutely beautiful filmmaking that is present in this film, but I just kind of have to mention that because I do think that this is a film that is heavy on dialogue. It's an incredibly long film. It can be very slow at times, and while it does tackle very, very important subject matter and in a very serious way, I oftentimes, as a viewer of long dramas like this, very often found myself bored. I found myself not overly engaged with the characters, emotionally at least. I was always intrigued to see where things would go, and there was a consistent intrigue just simply because of all of the talent behind the screen and on screen that was making this film a reality. But by the time I got to the end of the film, I wish I had loved it more. I wish this was a film that I could be raving to you guys a lot more about. But ultimately, what I can really say as a ginormous fan of film and somebody who is trying to break into film criticism here with this channel and has had the ability now to review hundreds of films here on the channel, I can ultimately say that I found this more to be a film that I admired all of the filmmaking elements of, more so than I did the actual narrative and the characters. And that's not to say in any way, shape, or form that there aren't incredible things to say about this film when it comes to the performances, when it comes to the characters, because I think Martin Scorsese and the team involved in this for sure brought a lot of passion and energy and realism to the overall way that this world is portrayed. One of the things that's the most impressive about this is the fact that it's a period piece and it feels like a period piece. The costume design, the set design, the vehicles used, the buildings used, I mean, the locations used, everything about this film feels authentic. This is a very realistic and authentic feeling film of its time, and in that sense, as a period piece and as something that's tackling heavy subject matter, it really does land on all of those fronts. But as a narrative, which is where I tend to connect with films the most, I just felt a little bored. I just constantly was watching the movie, hoping to feel a little bit more of a grip on my heart, which is the thing that usually kind of drives me with movies. And it was more of my analytical side. It was more of my filmmaking buff side that was being, tantalized, if you will, less so than the part of my heart that wants to connect to a narrative and really want to revisit it. Because that's one thing I can say here is that I really appreciate how well made this film is, but it's not a film I'm clamoring to revisit at all in any way, shape, or form. And I'm a huge fan of Martin Scorsese films, and more often than not, his films are pretty long, multi-hour films, with a lot of them clocking in closer to 3 hours. And there are films in his filmography that I could rewatch countless times because they just are far more entertaining to watch. This is just a film that had all of the great things I want in a film when it comes to what we're seeing on screen and how it's utilized to come together. But ultimately, when it comes down to the narrative, there wasn't an abundance I found myself really clamoring to just really attach myself to. There wasn't much that I ever found myself feeling emotional about in subject matter that ultimately should make me feel far more emotional than I feel this film did in a lot of ways. Now, I've been rambling a little bit more about my thoughts here at the beginning part of this review, but let's talk a little bit about what this movie's about for anybody who's not familiar with what this whole story's about. Killers of the Flower Moon centers on a portion of the United States of America. Most notably, we're spending time in a portion that's in Oklahoma that's known as Osage Nation. The Osage Native American tribe owns this land, and it's a very lucrative land because there tends to be a lot of oil there. Because of that, a lot of white individuals from America have come over into the area trying to work with the Osage, trying to befriend them, trying to work for them, as well as trying to actually get into loving relationships with them to try to benefit from the finances that their family and their bloodline has. So right out of the gate, we're introduced to Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who is Ernest Burkhart, who is a fairly simple man and is just looking to get some work and reunite himself with his uncle, William Hale, played by Robert De Niro, who in this community is a very well-known white man who has made connections with the Osage tribe. He's somebody who they trust. He's somebody that they kind of lean on as kind of like a positive white figure within their community, and he's made a good name for himself in this world. And he pretty much gives his nephew, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, a new job to drive for him, essentially go and drive various individuals in the Osage tribe, almost like a cab. Whatever money you make, we'll give you a cut and you give me the rest. And not too long into it, he's kind of pushed to actually start a relationship with a woman named Molly, played by Lily Gladstone. And he ends up falling in love with this woman. They build a true loving relationship. And over the course of time, his uncle, William Hale, is kind of pushing him in different ways to make some decisions that ultimately are not in the best interest of the Osage tribe, ultimately leading to some pretty horrific things. And I'll leave it at that. And over the course of the film, you have to deal with corruption, racism, greed, and so many other incredibly real and fucked up things that happened in our society. It happened in our nation's history. There's no getting around it. And this film tackles the, just very base narrative of white man taking over Native American land in a very real and serious way. And I think that that's where this film shines the most, as I mentioned before. I think it's a film that is very well made, so it feels realistic, and so it feels very well done by all of the people involved on screen and behind the screen, and so there's no denying that in any way, shape, or form, and I was incredibly impressed by that while watching. But despite all the things that I mentioned here, I just wish I felt more connected to the characters. I wish that I felt more emotionally connected to the story that we're seeing. And while I found it to be, again, an incredibly well-made film with some fantastic performances that I just have to highlight, and I know I've said it a few times now, I just really wish I felt some sort of real connection. The biggest highlights for me in terms of performances, though, Leonardo DiCaprio is fantastic in this film as Ernest. I really felt that his character is somebody that you kind of want to root for at times, but ultimately you struggle to root for because he kind of goes with the flow of a lot of things because of his simple-mindedness, and at times you feel for him because of that, but oftentimes as well you recognize that this is how this kind of thing went, making sometimes a simple-minded, likable guy into an unlikable guy under the manipulation of the wrong individuals. And I think the real heart of this film is the character of Molly, played by Lily Gladstone. She was phenomenal in the film, and though her scenes are at times can be very subdued, I found that her performances throughout the course of the film was really what kind of had the heart of the film. You know, she's the one you feel for the most over the course of the film, as she's at the center of not only this romance with Leonardo DiCaprio's character, but also at the center of watching her, you know, Native American community taking hit after hit after hit. And I feel like Lily Gladstone, without a doubt, was the heart and center of this movie, and I found myself most connected to her. But even with all of those things said, again, my biggest negative with this film has to be its pacing, and has to be the fact that because of its pacing and the fact that I feel like a lot could have been trimmed out, I just never felt emotionally connected. I 110% recognize that there is going to be a percentage of film-loving fans, and even fans of historical dramas, that are going to watch this film and absolutely love it. And I think that there are going to be a percentage of audience members that go into this and are maybe bored. I don't necessarily think this is going to be a film that I can say is just going to be a pleaser. I don't think this is a really well-made film that is just going to work for everybody and that everybody's going to love it, that this is just a must-see, everybody rush to the theater kind of movie. I think it's going to depend on what you want out of a movie. I think if you've seen the trailers and a 3.5 hour long, you know, slower paced, dialogue heavy historical drama does not sound like it's up your alley, then it's probably best to know that may not be up your alley. So anyway, I'm just going to stop rambling now. Big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and let me know what you guys thought about the movie down below. I definitely am looking forward to the various opinions that I know this movie is going to have. But as a fan of film, it's certainly worth watching, even if I didn't love it nearly as much as I thought I would. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.